Hey guys, I'm really excited about this video, not only because it took me a long time to edit, but because we are going to be working with some exciting technology. We're going to be working with Docker, Rover, Rover Ignite, YAML, creating TF4s files with Ansible, and we are going to do it all in this video and create our first launchpad in Azure. So let's get started. Alright, so the first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at Docker container explanation and installation. So I'll go through that first after this. We're going to install VS Code extensions. We're going to work with Rover, which is a container, and I'll show you guys how to actually install and run it on your machine. We're going to use Rover Ignite, which is basically using Ansible to convert your YAML into TF4s files, which is pretty cool. And then we're going to deploy Launchpad with Terraform. So let's get started. So essentially what we first of all want to look at is Docker and the containers and an explanation of it. So first things first, let's just talk about what makes a traditional virtual machine. Now, you may have over here your server. So your server, I'm just going to use my laptop just in this case, is my laptop essentially. It's my tin. Okay, that's my server. Then on my tin of which is basically my laptop, I will install Windows 10. So I've got Windows 10 over here. Then after that, I'm going to be looking at the hypervisor. So essentially I'll install a program which will allow me to create like a virtual machine or VMware. So I'd install Hyper-V or VMware, usually, you know, probably on different servers, but in this case, if I wanted to, I could install it on my laptop and then run a virtual machine from there. And then when you run and create a virtual machine, you pretty much have a guest OS. So it's a virtual machine within your actual computer. However, the difference between this and what a Docker container essentially is that you still have your server. So I have my laptop, which is my tin again, my host OS, again my Windows 10. Then my Docker engine, so essentially that's kind of like the same thing as a hypervisor, so essentially it's just at that layer, and then it runs a container. But notice the difference between it. It doesn't have guest OS, so I don't have to worry about stuff such as you know, a network interface card or storage or anything like that. I can just run it and not worry about what computers I'm running it from. So that's what essentially Docker containers is. So now let's get to installing Docker. Open up my web browser. I look for Docker, and if you just click on here, it gets started with Docker today. Right, and then get started and then download the Docker desktop. Right, once it's downloaded, open the file. And yes. And it's just gonna install for you. We're gonna carry on and just accept the defaults. Right, and there we are. The installation succeeded. Sometimes I know if you've not installed it properly, you might want to search for WSL2, and then you can click on install WSL2. I'll include the link for you guys, but it's just basically again the next. So I'll include this list. Right, so what we now need to do is we now need to actually restart our machine. Okay, we're back. So once you've restarted the machine, you should see this installation prompt. So basically just accept the terms, and that should be Docker being installed for you. Okay, so once it's installed, you can have a look for Docker in a few easy steps. Look at the tutorial. I don't really need it, so I'm going to just skip the tutorial. So that's all we need for now. What we need to do now is we need to open up Visual Studio Code, and we've got Docker installed. We need to install a couple of extensions as well. So it actually it recommends you some extensions anyway, but I'm going to search for it in the search bar over here. So you again click on extensions, and then over here click on install on Docker. And then what we also need is remote containers, which is this one. So we will install the remote containers. Now notice once you install this remote containers, at the bottom left, you will actually have a open folder and container. Right, so now that we've actually installed Docker and installed the extensions, let's just get the correct environment going. So let's visit this aztfmod.github.io/documentation. Let's start deploying. And now let me introduce you what Rover is. It's you know, you can, no matter what environment you basically run, whether you run a Mac, Windows, or Linux, because you're running the container, it's all going to be the same throughout. You're not really worried about, like, you know, for example, your PC being different to somebody else's PC. Maybe there's certain path variables that you've included in your PC, but you haven't included in theirs. So what Rover aims to do is eliminate that by just getting you to use a container. So that's the great thing about it. It has Microsoft best tooling, and this is basically built by Microsoft. So essentially it has Visual Studio Code. It can integrate with GitHub Codespaces, and yeah, it's a really great program that they've written. It's also a Terraform wrapper, so it's essentially, again, you can use that instead of maybe using a Terraform extension in Azure DevOps, or maybe using you know, your own pipeline, for example, commits to install Terraform or something like that. Rover already has everything installed, so that's why Rover is such a great tool to use. So in Rover, you have certain different versions and tools. You have this is where basically it's saying what kind of tools are installed on Rover. So as you can see, there's quite a lot. There's PowerShell, MS SQL tools, AZ, JQ, Python, Terraform, Terraform Docs, Vault, Packer, Ansible. So, you know, there is a lot of tools here installed, and to be honest with you, if you're going to work on your local environment, and if you start deploying things from your local environment to Azure, which is you really shouldn't do, you should be using pipelines to actually deploy your infrastructure as code. With Rover commands in Terraform, you have a couple of different file extensions, but essentially the ones that we have are .tf and .tf files. So LZ is basically going to is going to be using your template of your Terraform, while your var folder, your tf vars folder, is going to be basically your variables, your configuration items. So for example, names of virtual machines, virtual networks, which is, you know, private to you. Now the thing is with Rover right now is, before what happened was, they used to supply you this like starter repository, which was about like having these TF-var files, which you basically just copied, and then you tried using them, you tried to do find and replace and all of that kind of stuff. Well, they changed that now, and instead of us copying Rover, like the TF-vars files from a starter repository, it's actually changed. So instead, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using Rover Ignite to generate those TF-var files. So that's what we're going to concentrate and focus on next. This is quite new and has been released in March 2022 basically. So I am going to go ahead and try along with you guys to get this deployed. And it allows you to quote what subscription ID you want to put it to, target subscription, it'll allow you to name your TF state. Now, what TF state is, Terraform is a stateful language. So what happens is when you actually deploy any resources, it captures it into a state file, and then it compares that state file between your Azure environment as you deploy, and it notes if any of the resources that you've deployed have changed or modified, and then it's going to try and put it back to what the code basically states. So that's why it's really important for Terraform and being state aware that your resources are, and that's why Terraform is such a powerful language. Right. So now that we've done that, what we need to do is we need to actually go through and use Rover Ignite. What Rover Ignite does, now this is something absolutely new. When I was working with this before in an environment, what happened was we had a starter template that you would use. So you would use configuration files, but evidently this team didn't see the wide adoption of it as they would like. So what they've done is they created this tool which basically quotes your subscription and generates your TFRs for you. And we're going to be using that today. You can see that you can basically create the TFRs files using the YAMLs. So it'll generate both the TFRs, readmes, and soon pipelines. So they're still working on actually generating pipelines. So I'm really looking forward to that. So let's just follow the instructions. So they say to get started. Now, what we need to do, we're going to be using a local repository. So you can use CodeSpace if you want, but we're going to be using a local one. So this project is here. So we're just going to open up a new tab, and we're going to, what I'm going to do, we're going to essentially use this template. So what we need to do actually now is let's just copy this. We're gonna do a little bit different to how they say it, because basically over here is like if you want to use GitHub repositories, but what I'm looking forward to doing is using the DevOps repositories. So what I'm going to quickly do is I'm going to go to dev.azure.com, caf Terraform. I'm going to create a new repository called configuration. And I'm going to create, and it's going to, now I'm going to clone the repository again. I'm going to go into Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to go into my terminal. cd dot dot to go to my previous. If I do cd projects and I do ls, that's gonna show me exactly what's in my project. So let's just create a new folder, which is gonna be caf Terraform. Okay. And in here, we've made a new folder. So we're just going to switch to this folder. So caf Terraform. In here, we're now going to git clone the starter repositories. Now, one thing to mention is that when you do that, they do say that you should, you should just do your organization. So they say like the org repo, but we've already cloned it. So let me just show you guys what we're gonna do. It's a little bit different way, but I prefer to do it this way. Now that we've done that and we've cloned the starter.git, what we need to now do is we need to, if we just check the guidance again, they tell us to once you clone it, open Visual Studio Code and open up the folder. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go open folder, click into this PC, projects, and then it'll be caf Terraform, and then it'll be the configuration. So we're gonna open this up. And as you can see, we have all these files. Don't worry about the whole commits. That's if we want to basically push it to dev.azure.com, which we can do that. So we can do initial commit. And sync changes. So that means it's going to be in our dev environment, which is good for us to know. Now what we're going to be doing is clicking on this little button at the bottom left, and then just click on open folder and container, and then just click on open. So right now what's going to happen is we're actually going to launch our Rover container locally on our machine, and we can now work with it and go through with it. It might take some time to run, so just give a moment, and then yeah, you should be able to see this. So now that we've updated it, and it says configuring, but it says press done, press any key to close the terminal. So we will. Now we will click on new terminal, and we are now in CAF-GIT. So essentially over here, this is a good sign if you go over here. So that means we are actually going to now start creating our TF-vars files using the pipelines that they recommend. So again, if we go back to the instructions, they say here, and then they say to clone the CAF Terraform landing zones code. So as I try to want to explain to you guys that the landing zones repository is the bit where it's like it's your module. It's the that's your template that you will use to actually deploy your code. It's sometimes called landing zones, it's called logic sometimes, so it's your modules basically. If you think of a ARM template, for example, you might have your parameters and you might have your actual configuration. So that's what it is, like it's your module. So we're going to copy this code, and we're going to copy this, but what they say is that we actually want this. They want git clone, and then but they recommend to use landing zones. It's used to drive consistency. So if we are going to have an open world project where everybody's using these modules, then it might be better and easier for you guys to for the templates to actually use landing zones. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go paste this here, and of course we're gonna type in landing zones. You could have just copied it from there if you wanted to. Sorry, git clone, and then landing zones. Okay, so now we have the files which are going to be copied into our container, and we will now have a landing zones folder which is going to include all this data. So the next step is to actually switch to the landing zones version. So we are going to, let's have a look. So they say go to the landing zones folder, and then not all folders are starting with tfcaf in the dev containers. All right, so let's just do that. Let's cd to the landing zones directory. Okay, cool. So now we can see we are in the landing zones directory. Again, you can do print work in directory to show you exactly where you are in Rover right now. Then they say to switch to the selected landing zone version. So they say from the terminal run the following command to select the branch. So we're gonna do git checkout. Let's just have a look at what is the most recent version that they have. So they have a 2203.1 as the latest, while over here in the guide they say 2203.0. So let's do sorry, 1 second. Let's do git checkout 2203.1. So we're going to open up Visual Studio Code and type in git checkout 2203.1. So now we have that. So now they say to go to the next step in the scenario. So right now we're gonna just work with the single subscription. They have multi-subscriptions and multi-subscription with enterprise agreement. So I'm looking forward to using this. Documentation is still to be published. So we're just gonna use single subscription. And of course, as soon as this is released, I'm gonna also create a video on it with the documentation. So hopefully it's all up to date. Okay, cool. So we start and look at the single subscription deployment lab. So the purpose of the lab is to get us started. We are now going to look at the required privileges. So what happens is because we're, as I've recommended to you guys before, to create a new tenant, you should have global administrator rights. If you are working in a test environment and you do not have global administrator rights, you might struggle with the next Launchpad. I've tried to deploy some of this without global administrator and finding out the security principles I need for it. It's very tough. So it's best to just, even if it is a test environment, and you're working with a company, so maybe ask for temporary so you can run this. But I really advise you to run this in a tenant if you're just learning how to get started. You will need one subscription of owner privileges. You should hopefully have that subscription created as we have gone through in week 3. And you should have, if you've created it, you should have owner access to that subscription. And let's see, what else is there? And they also suggest that you need management group contributor permissions on a branch or root management group. Now what this means is if you go into management groups, you will have on your management groups a different so what we might want to do is we might want to just start using the management groups. Just click on that. Set up the directory to actually make sure that your management groups are what you will have created is a root tenant group, and from there you will then be able to create management groups underneath that tenant root group. So let's just refresh the page to see if it's done it. Okay, cool. So now this is the usual management group stuff. So tenant root group is at the very top level. Okay, so that basically affects your entire Azure AD. And then what we need to do is we will in our later videos is actually create new management groups to go under the tenant root group, as CAF suggests. So we will go ahead and do that. So right now the Visual Studio's enterprise subscription is at the tenant root group, which is good. Right. So the next thing that we go do is we go log into Azure. So hopefully your Rover has launched and we've been working with it. So if we just click on type in Rover, just to see that we are in Rover, notice that we have an error saying you must log in. So how I log in is I type in Rover login, and then it says to sign in use a web browser. So I'm going to first of all copy this code, code control and click, and then I'm going to put in my code. Then I'm going to select the account I'm using for this this exercise I've created an account, so I've got this. Then I'm going to check my current subscriptions. So if I do asset account show, it should now navigate to you your subscription ID which you might be using. So it'll show you a tenant ID and a subscription ID. If for example you have multiple subscriptions in your tenant right now and it selects the wrong one, what we should do is go into here, go into your subscription, copy the subscription ID, and then go into your Visual Studio Code and then write AZ account set, that's a subscription, and then paste the subscription number. And that is going to set your actual it's going to set Rover to that subscription. Okay? So the next bit that we will do in here is, so we've logged into Azure, which is great. So when login is successful, you will see the Rover displaying. I believe we have seen this as well. If you look over here, we have this. This is a little bit of a leftover from the previous ones, Sandpit. I remember using the configuration files that they had before. But we will go ahead and change all of these variables now. So essentially what we need to now do is create the definition template on your work environment. Okay, so we're gonna copy this and then we're just gonna paste this along. Is that what we need to do? I guess it is, yeah. And then we will hit enter. And it says no inventory was passed, only implicit localhost is available. So now it's gonna actually ask me for some variables. So I'm gonna call mine what I have of the tenant, I guess, because it's just like it's a short version of your customer name. So whatever you've created, whether it's a certain company, whether it's Microsoft, or you're working for someone, or you want to write your name if you wanted to. I'm just going to use what I've dictated in my tenant. Set the CAF environment value. Again, I will just keep it as the same. Set the prefix or resources. Now this is very interesting because before I had to actually write the prefix myself in the TF files, but in this case what it does is it allows you to, because you must remember that when creating all these resources, some of them are going to be globally unique. So therefore, when you create these resources, you might want to have a prefix for these resources in order to identify for yourself. And one of the other things I would say is sometimes you have to be careful of doing a long prefix, because some resources will have a certain naming limit. So key votes I believe is like 24 characters. So we let's do like something which is like very basic but for us. So we're gonna just do CAF2 for us. Let's actually make it a little bit more unique. So I'll do CAF AP, just CAF and my initials. Okay. Management group prefix. Right, so essentially what it's saying is, you remember when we actually created the management groups? It's saying what we should have as a prefix for that. So we will again go into Visual Studio 2 and we're gonna just let's keep with the CAF AP. Hopefully nobody has taken it. Right. Then management group name. So let's keep with CAF Terraform 2 and email address to send all notifications. Okay, so what was my? I'll just write an email of mine which I have. created, let's see, what did I have before? So maybe something, let's use kafterraform@pavlichuk.com. Just any random email address, but for this case I've created yep, I pressed the wrong button. So kafterraform@pavlichuk.com. Okay. So this is an interesting one. Regions. So essentially what they recommend is that when you go into a new text file, you should be doing it in such a way. So if I go over here and then I change, since I'm from UK, I want to use paired regions. So I want to use UK South as my main region, and then I want to use UK West as my secondary region. And I will paste this in. Hopefully I have said it correctly. Let me just double check. Azure regions, so that should be, just check to make sure that it has done it. If I just go back here and then default CAF Azure region, so we're gonna do, okay, I think I screwed up the regions over here, so I did Control C to exit it, and then just I'm gonna rerun it again. So again, I'm gonna do CAF Terraform 2, CAF Terraform 2, CAF AP, CAF AP, CAF Terraform 2, and the email address, we're gonna use this one. And the regions, what I shouldn't have done, I should have included those brackets, because they're just those brackets are just like kind of, you'll see this sometimes written in code when you have those brackets. Basically don't include them, just include the bits which have these parentheses, okay, these curly brackets. And then the default one that we want to use is region 1. So it's now going to execute and it's going to create for us. Cool. I didn't really see many red errors, so I'm quite happy with that. So essentially what's happened now is if we look at the platform and we look at the definitions, it's actually created a bunch of YAML files for us, and it's mainly created this Ignite. So what's really cool is that these YAML files now contain my actual configuration variables, which because before in the past what happened was we had the TFVARs files, as I say, but it's like you had to fill it in manually and you had to try and figure it all out, while over here now they made it really automatic, so you can actually just have this as your basically prefix and template. So now that we've created this, well, let's just carry on following the guide. And we can see that we've now need to trigger the Rover Ignite. So what Rover Ignite is going to do is going to take those YAML files that we've created and it's going to convert it into TFVARs for us. Okay? So let's just go back. So as they say, it's going to be using the Ansible playbook, and we're just going to basically use all of this to create our TFVARs files. So we will take that code, paste it in, and now what we should see is a bunch of Terraform TFVARs files. Now there's a red arrow because I haven't really ran Launchpad before, so this is the first time I'll be running Launchpad. But what's really great about this is that when you run these YAML and Ignite, it can actually check your environment already to see what has created and what has not created. So in this way, it allows you to do constant updates, and it helps you could do even like maybe you've used a landing zone for a customer, and you can then use the kind of the almost the same template but just change a bit of the variables. Or if you're an organization and you basically want to deploy kind of like the same that you've deployed before, that's really useful as well. So we now can see that within here we now have a bunch of TF-Vars files, and what's really cool is that if I just go into and explore this, my object ID and my permissions have actually taken that subscription that I had on board, and it's actually given an basically this is what's gonna work with us. So it's already filled in tenant ID. It already said what CAF Terraform 2, on Microsoft.com. It actually has populated all the files and in the correct format. You don't have to basically, if I was going to create this from scratch, for example, I would have to do dynamic key vault and then equals and then whatever, I have to basically create the module from scratch. Well, this eliminates that. You don't really need to actually be like a Terraform expert. You just can rely on these files, and and you can deploy your infrastructure. Right. So we've done this. Now we're gonna deploy the Launchpad, which is the level 0. So we're gonna go into TF configuration, and we're gonna check out the README quickly. So let's check out the level 0. Now, if you guys remember, on the levels, remember you need level 0 starts at the very top, and then it goes down. So order of importance, level 0, and then all the other levels feed off it. So if I look at my README, I can now check out my rover. So what we will do is, look at that. My subscription has already been filled in for me, which is really great. It's like I don't really have to worry about writing this command, and it helps like consistency, like in terms of you've got your structure and your pathing is all there, like because let me tell you from experience before, creating it like this and then having to actually figure out the paths within Rover, it can get quite cumbersome. So I'm glad that they've actually filled this all out. So let's just have a look to see if I can actually copy and paste this code. And let's see if it actually deploys something. The current account must have owner privilege. Right, so for me, currently, I didn't get owner privilege because I moved the subscription from elsewhere. So I'm just going to quickly go ahead and just check the access control for this. So right now, I'm user access administrator. So what you guys may not be aware of is that if you are an owner of your tenant, but you want to see all the subscriptions that are in your tenant, as long as you have global administrator, what you can do is this. You can go into Azure Active Directory, click on properties, and click on access management for Azure resources and put it on yes. Now I am going to say that you only enable this as you need it. Once you finish with it, take it off. It is very important in security terms that you take this off from your account once you finish with this. Okay, but now that you do that, you might have to log in and log out and log back in, but what essentially you get is you get a user access administrator role. So what this allows you to do is it allows you to administer your subscription permissions. So if I did add role permissions, I did owner, and I selected the members, and I've selected my CAF Terraform one. Review and assign, I'm going to add myself as the owner of this subscription. Then I'm going to hit up on Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to plan again, and hopefully this should now work. And we wait. As you can see, it's installing quite a bit of things, and you know, it's things that you wouldn't have to install in the background anyway. So we are now executed a plan. Now what a plan does is a plan looks at all your infrastructure at the moment, and it looks at all your configuration files and your modules, and then what it does is it plans out what it's going to build, and then once you basically create your plan, then you can run and apply those changes. So with Rover you have all of this kind of set, so we're doing level 0 of course, but yeah, we're just essentially doing -a plan. So when you plan, it should be like this. Now don't make this mistake I made. I actually was looking at the credentials, which was the readme, and then I was getting this. So essentially what I was getting an error. If I just scroll up a little bit more to here, I was getting an error saying storage account name and container name is not set. Now the reason behind that is that I have not actually ran the correct level 0. There are now 2. When I was working with it, there was only 1. So now there's 2 credentials and Launchpad. So Launchpad has to run first before you run the credentials. So let's just go ahead and let's just run the credentials. So we are gonna go over here. As you guys saw, I ran credentials. Sorry, I ran Launchpad, and I got 156 CAD. So let's go ahead and actually execute that plan. And what we will now see is we should see these resources being created in our Azure tenant. It's not going to run the plan again because it already takes what the plan was. So it's now creating the storage accounts and the resource groups and the applications. Okay, it has completed for me, but it seems to have a few errors. So let's just check out what these errors are. Enabling directory role groups administrator. Error running command, and enabling directory role application administrator. And again, enabling roles. So basically it's failed to do it because there's apparently a conflicting object. Okay, we will check this out, and let's have a look to see what's happened on the Azure portal. So if we go into Azure, well, let's just check out to see what has been deployed. So first of all, we can see that key vaults have been deployed, storage accounts have been deployed. As you see, I have specified CAF AP. If you wonder about these characters, random characters, is if we actually go back to our TF-vars files, we should be able to see that over there. There's a bit which says random length over here under global settings, which will be free. So it's basically adding some random characters at the end to make it more globally unique. And it's also adding a prefix, so I've added a prefix of CAFAP to, again, as storage accounts are globally unique, that's why this has happened. So let's have a look at the actual throwdown. So we see a level 1, a level 2 has been deployed, and a level 0 for key vault, which is good. And if we just check out in the subscription, we will check out access roles, and we can now see a bunch of groups have been created for this role. So that's good. So that's now created for us. So let's have a look. What we are checking out now is the roles. So apparently, if I just look for type and I'd search for custom role, now no roles have been created for over here in the Visual Studio subscription. If I look on Azure Active Directory, I look at roles, and I will now look for a filter, and I would search for a type. Now I would search for a custom role. Now it hasn't created the custom roles, which is really interesting enough. Let's just have a quick look again. So a conflicting is present in a target role. A conflicting one or more specified property. I just run again. Sometimes I know when I run it again, it just picks up and fixes itself. But let's just have a look to see what we can do. Right, yeah, but we need to run a plan first again, not an apply. So let's just have a look to see what we can do. So it is saying to us that the resource is tainted, so must be replaced. So it's going to try and replace a role for. So the application administrator, the two groups administrators, one in identity and one in level 0. We can try and apply, see if that actually fixes it. If not, we might have to do manual delete. So let's have a look. So it seems to have destroyed the rows. Let's see if it will now create the rows for us. Cool, brilliant. So now that's actually complete, and 13 have been added, 3 have been destroyed, so therefore something is up. Remember, it's creating a lot of things in the background here, so you might want to sometimes just rerun again, because sometimes it may not execute it in the right way, depending whether the portal is slow or not in creating certain roles or features. So it's I find that during Launchpad sometimes it does happen like that. So yeah, that's basically the best way to fix it. So if we now have a look at again, and we look at roles, and we search for now, if I should be able to find some custom roles created. Not custom roles in Azure AD, custom roles in, there's a difference between roles between subscription and roles between Azure Active Directory. Okay guys, with our resources deployed, we also need to check out our Azure Active Directory, what has been applied. So if we look at Azure Active Directory, look at roles and administrators, we can see that in Application Administrator, identity level 0 and subscription creation landing zones has been applied. If we go back and we check, also scroll down, find groups administrator, we can see identity level 0 and again subscription creation landing zones has been applied. And again, if we go back one more and check user administrator. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you like the content, subscribe, hit that notification bell, hit the like, and follow me on LinkedIn. And I will see you on the next one. We're gonna be continuing on with our journey with Rover and actually deploying some level 1 and level 2 resources. So I'll see you in the next one.